After a harsh and unjust accusation tore his father away, a young boy rose against all odds to rewrite his family's fate. Chasing the Skyline. Mason Ridge was a town where the streets always remembered. The cracked sidewalks, the leaning fences, the peeling paint on old houses. All of them carried stories, and those stories never faded. In Mason Ridge, once people whispered about your family, those whispers became part of your name. They stuck to you like rain on wet clothes. You could never shake them off. Caleb Turner had always known life was different for his family. His father, David Turner, was not like other men in town. David was quiet, steady, and worked hard at the auto repair shop just off Main Street. Caleb remembered the smell of grease on his father's hands, the soft hum of country music in the background, and the way his father's deep voice told stories about old cars and distant places. But all of that shattered on a gray October morning. The sky was heavy that day, thick with clouds that pressed low over the town. Caleb was only 10 years old when the sirens came screaming down their street. He remembered it too clearly, the way they wailed louder and louder until they stopped right outside their house. The police cars, their lights spinning in red and blue, looked like monsters in the mist. Caleb's mother had been in the kitchen making breakfast when the knock came, loud, sharp, and cold. She dried her hands quickly on a towel and opened the door, her face tightening when she saw the sheriff standing there. "David Turner," the sheriff said, his voice firm and cold. "You are under arrest for armed robbery." The words didn't make sense at first. Caleb's heart thumped hard in his chest. He clutched the wooden frame of the living room door, peeking out with wide eyes. His father stepped forward, calm but confused. There must be some mistake. But the sheriff didn't blink. 2 other officers were already pulling out the handcuffs. Caleb's mother screamed, begging them to wait, to check again. "My husband was home that night. He never left this house." But they didn't listen. They shoved David into the back of the police car as the neighbors peeked through their curtains. Caleb ran outside, his small feet slapping against the pavement. "Dad," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Dad, don't go. Please." His father turned, his face pale but steady, and forced a smile. "It's going to be all right, son. I promise." But it wasn't all right. The trial came fast. The town had already made up its mind. People whispered in the grocery store, in the barber shop at church. "That's David Turner's boy, the son of a thief." Caleb could feel their stares like cold fingers on his skin. Even the evidence was strange. They said David's fingerprints were on the cash register at the store that had been robbed. They said his truck was seen nearby, but none of it made sense. His father had been home all night, watching TV with Caleb. He knew that. His mother knew it too. But somehow, their words weren't enough. Caleb sat in the hard wooden seat of the courtroom, swinging his legs nervously as the judge read the verdict. "Guilty." His mother broke down in tears. Caleb's stomach twisted. His world crashed. After that day, everything changed. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid them. His friends at school stopped talking to him. Teachers looked at him differently. It was like Caleb had caught a sickness no one wanted to touch. He stopped going to the corner store because the clerk always gave him that look, a mix of pity and fear. He stopped playing baseball because the other boys didn't want him on their team anymore. The only thing Caleb didn't stop doing was walking the streets at night, staring at the skyline, chasing dreams that felt too far to reach. The name Turner was now heavy, like a chain wrapped around his neck. No matter where he went in Mason Ridge, it followed him. And deep inside, Caleb promised himself that one day he would clear his father's name. He would prove the truth, no matter what it took. But the road ahead would not be easy, and the town would not forget. The days after the trial were slow, heavy, and painful. It was like the whole world had turned its back on the Turners. The house felt colder. The walls seemed to whisper at night. Even the air in Mason Ridge seemed to press down on them, as if the town wanted to crush them for something they didn't do. Caleb's mother, Elaine Turner, became the only pillar left standing. She didn't have time to cry anymore. The day after her husband was taken away, she tied her hair back, put on her old blue waitress uniform, and went back to work at Rosie's Diner. There was no choice. Bills had to be paid. Food had to be bought. Life didn't wait for broken hearts. Every morning, before the sun rose, Elaine left the house. Caleb would watch her from his bedroom window, standing in the soft morning light, carrying her tired body to the small diner on the corner of Maple Street. She worked long hours, wiping tables, carrying heavy plates, and forcing polite smiles to customers who whispered about her behind her back. "She's the wife of a thief," they would say when they thought she couldn't hear. But she always heard, and yet she kept her head high. Caleb admired her for that. At school, life wasn't much kinder to Caleb. Teachers didn't call on him in class. They thought he wouldn't know the answers. Some even watched him too closely, as if they were waiting for him to steal something. His classmates whispered when he walked by, "That's him. That's the Turner boy. He's just like his dad." Caleb heard it all. The names, the laughter, the cold silence. It wrapped around him like a second skin. There were days he wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground and never come back. But instead, he kept walking. He kept showing up. He kept pushing through the weight. Sometimes, after school, he would help his mother at the diner. He wiped tables and washed plates in the back room. The smell of burnt coffee and frying oil stuck to his clothes. The regulars would glance at him, some with pity, some with disgust. But he didn't care. He kept scrubbing. At night, when the town grew quiet, Caleb would sit on the front steps of their house and stare at the skyline. The way the tips of buildings and tall trees touched the fading orange of the evening sky. He dreamed of life beyond Mason Ridge, of places where his last name didn't matter, where he could be someone else, someone better. "I'm going to leave this town one day," he whispered to himself. "I'll make Mom proud. I'll clear Dad's name. I'll show them I'm not like what they think." His father's memory was both a wound and a light inside him. It hurt to remember, but it also kept him moving. He still heard his father's last words, "It's going to be all right, son. I promise." But it wasn't all right. Not yet. Sometimes, Caleb would walk into his father's old workshop in the backyard. The place still smelled of engine oil and metal. His father's tools were exactly where he had left them, as if he might walk in at any moment and pick up where he left off. Caleb would sit there, touching the worn handles of the screwdrivers, running his fingers over the rough workbench. In those quiet moments, it felt like his father was still nearby, like the walls still remembered his voice. But the world outside didn't forget either. There was always someone watching, always someone ready to remind him of who they thought he was. One evening, as his mother tucked him into bed after a long day at the diner, she kissed his forehead and whispered, "You're stronger than you know, Caleb. Don't ever let this town decide who you are." Her words sank deep into his heart. So Caleb kept walking, kept dreaming, and kept holding on to the silent promise he had made to himself. One day, he would escape Mason Ridge. One day, he would clear his father's name. One day, the Turners would rise again. But he didn't know that the road ahead would test him in ways he could never imagine. The years moved like thick syrup in Mason Ridge, slow, sticky, and heavy. For most people in town, life had a rhythm. You grew up, found a simple job, married someone from your street, and stayed in Mason Ridge forever. But not Caleb Turner. Caleb was different. He didn't want Mason Ridge to be his ending. He wanted more. As a teenager, Caleb barely had time to breathe. His life was a tight, careful routine. Before the sun had a chance to wake, he was already up, folding newspapers with quick, practiced hands. He delivered them door to door on his old, rusty bicycle, the morning air biting at his skin. When school let out, Caleb didn't hang around like the other kids. He didn't go to football games. He didn't go to parties. He didn't sit around telling stories by the corner store. Instead, he mowed lawns. He washed cars. He cleaned greasy workshops where grown men barely noticed him. He scrubbed floors until his fingers ached and stacked boxes until his back stiffened. Every dollar mattered. Every minute counted. His mother still worked long hours at the diner, her hands cracked and tired from years of cleaning and carrying. Sometimes she came home so exhausted she could barely make it to the couch. But when Caleb tucked a few folded dollar bills in her coat pocket, pretending she wouldn't notice, she always did. And she always smiled. At school, Caleb stayed quiet. He sat in the middle row, kept his head down, and focused on his books. He was smart, but no one really saw it. Most teachers had already decided who he was. A Turner, a boy from a broken family. They didn't expect much from him, and maybe that was his secret weapon. Because while everyone else was wasting time, Caleb was building something. Something no one could see yet. A future. One afternoon, while sitting alone in the school library, flipping through old textbooks, his guidance counselor, Mr. Reynolds, approached him. Mr. Reynolds was a kind man, quiet but sharp, and he had been watching Caleb for some time. "You're always here after class," he said, pulling out a chair. "You work hard." "I like that." Caleb shrugged. "I don't have much of a choice." Mr. Reynolds placed a thin brochure on the table. The cover was bright and bold. Hudson Community College, New York City. Caleb stared at it like it was a ticket to another world. "Ever think about leaving Mason Ridge?" Mr. Reynolds asked. Caleb's heart jumped. "Every day," he whispered. "Well," the counselor said, tapping the brochure, "this could be your way out. Scholarships. Affordable housing. It's not fancy, but it's a start. And it's far from here." Caleb picked up the brochure, his hands trembling slightly. New York. A place so big, so loud, so full of life that maybe, just maybe, a small-town boy with a broken name could disappear into its streets and start over. That night, he lay awake staring at his cracked ceiling, the brochure resting on his chest. He imagined the tall buildings, the flashing lights, the rush of people. He imagined walking streets where no one knew him, where no one would call him the Turner Boy. The dream of New York began to burn inside him. It started small, like a flicker of light, but soon it grew brighter, stronger. It filled him. It became his purpose. From that day, every job, every test, every long, lonely night felt different. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building his escape. But even as he dreamed of freedom, something still pulled at him. His father's voice, soft and steady, echoed in his mind. "It's going to be all right, son. I promise." Caleb promised too. He promised to chase the skyline. He promised to make his mother proud. He promised to clear his father's name. No matter how far he had to go, the road was opening. The skyline was calling. Caleb Turner had spent his whole life trapped inside the tight, dusty streets of Mason Ridge. The town had felt like a cage for so long that sometimes he wondered if he would ever escape. But the day finally came, the day he'd been waiting for, working for, dreaming about. It was the day he left. Graduation wasn't like the movies. There were no loud cheers or proud speeches for Caleb. His mother sat in the back row of the small gym, clapping softly as he walked across the stage to collect his diploma. Some people didn't even bother to clap. But Caleb didn't care. The piece of paper in his hand wasn't just a diploma. It was his key, his door out of Mason Ridge. After the ceremony, his mother hugged him tightly, her arms warm and trembling. "You did it," she whispered, her voice caught between pride and sadness. "Your father would be so proud." Caleb swallowed hard. His throat felt tight. "I'm going to make things right, Mom. For both of you." She smiled, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Just chase your dreams, Caleb. That's enough. That's all I ever wanted for you." The day he packed his bag was quiet. He didn't have much, just a small duffel filled with a few changes of clothes, some money he had saved from all his jobs, and one thing he would never leave behind, his father's old watch. The watch didn't even work anymore. Its hands were frozen in place, stuck at 4:17. But to Caleb, it was more than a watch. It was a reminder, a connection to his father. It was the weight of where he came from and the fire of where he was going. His mother stood at the bus stop with him, holding his hand tightly. The morning breeze brushed against them, and the street was mostly empty except for the old bus groaning in the distance as it rolled toward them. "I don't know how long it will take," Caleb said, his voice shaking a little, "but I'll find the truth, Mom. I'll fix his name. I'll make us proud." Elaine Turner squeezed his hand. "I know you will, son. I've always known." The bus doors opened with a tired hiss. Caleb turned to his mother one last time. She reached into her pocket and pressed something into his palm. It was a folded note. "Read it later," she whispered. Caleb threw his arms around her, holding on longer than he planned to. He could feel her heart racing against his chest. Letting go was the hardest thing he had ever done. As he climbed on the bus, he found a window seat near the back and pressed his forehead against the cool glass. The bus pulled away slowly, and his mother grew smaller and smaller in the distance, waving until she disappeared. The town, with its broken streets, its small shops, and its heavy whispers, began to fade behind him. For the first time, Caleb felt something strange, something sharp and wild in his chest. It wasn't just fear. It wasn't just sadness. It was freedom, and freedom felt big. It felt too big for his hands. He unfolded his mother's note, his fingers trembling. Her handwriting was small, but careful. No matter how far you go, you will always carry us with you. You are stronger than the weight of this town. Chase your skyline, Caleb. I'll be waiting when you find it. Tears filled his eyes as the bus rumbled forward. Miles and miles of road stretched out ahead, leading him to the unknown, a city where dreams could either live or die, where the past might finally let go or hold on even tighter. Caleb Turner was leaving Mason Ridge behind, but the name Turner was still wrapped around him, and the journey to chase the skyline had only just begun. When Caleb Turner first stepped off the bus in New York City, the world swallowed him whole. The city was alive, loud, and fast. Cars honked. People shouted. Lights blinked. Doors slammed. Feet rushed past him as if time itself was chasing everyone. New York didn't wait. Not for anyone. Not for a boy from Mason Ridge. The buildings stretched so high they looked like they could cut the sky in half. The streets were crowded with people who didn't look at him, didn't care who he was, didn't know about the weight of the name Turner. At first, Caleb felt like maybe that was a good thing. No one whispered. No one crossed the street to avoid him. But soon, he realized something else. In New York, no one saw him at all. The city was cold, not just in weather, but in the way people moved past each other without slowing down. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to go, something to chase. Caleb was just another face in a sea of strangers. Finding a place to live was harder than he thought. Apartments were too expensive. Rooms were too small. Landlords didn't care about his story. They cared about money, and Caleb didn't have much. He finally found a tiny room in a shared apartment. The walls were thin, the windows were cracked, and the radiator hissed angrily through the night. But it was his. It was where he would start. To survive, Caleb took every job he could find. In the mornings, he worked at a corner bakery, scrubbing pans and wiping down tables until his arms felt like they would fall off. In the afternoons, he delivered groceries, racing through the streets with heavy bags, weaving between cars and people. At night, he cleaned offices. Empty buildings were the only sounds where his footsteps and the soft hum of computers left on. 3 jobs, 7 days a week, little pay, even less sleep. And somewhere in the middle of all that, he squeezed in his community college classes. At first, he sat in the front row, eager and ready. But soon, exhaustion caught up with him. His eyes grew heavy during lectures. His homework stayed unfinished. His grades began to fall, slow at first, then faster. Sometimes, he didn't even hear the alarm in the morning. Sometimes he missed work. Sometimes he missed class. Sometimes he thought about giving up. The city chipped away at him like rain slowly breaking stone. Bit by bit, day by day, his body grew weaker. His spirit felt smaller. But every time he felt like stopping, he would reach into his pocket and hold his father's broken watch, the cold metal pressing into his palm. And he would remember his mother's words. Chase your skyline, Caleb. I'll be waiting when you find it. Those words kept him moving. On the worst nights, when he collapsed onto his thin mattress, his muscles burning, his stomach empty, and his heart heavy, he would whisper to the ceiling, I can't stop. I won't stop. Not now, even though the city seemed too big, even though the weight seemed too much, even though he was alone. Caleb Turner had made a promise. To his mother, to his father, to himself. And promises like that were not meant to be broken. But the road was far from over. And New York City wasn't done testing him yet. New York was loud, busy, and cold, but somehow, in the middle of it all, Caleb Turner found Sophie. It happened on a rainy afternoon. Caleb had just finished his shift at the bakery, his clothes smelling like sugar and burnt bread. He was walking quickly, head down, trying to avoid the puddles when he crashed into her outside a bookstore. Books tumbled to the ground. Caleb dropped his delivery bag. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, he stammered, bending down to help her. When he looked up, she smiled, A real smile, warm and bright, the kind he hadn't seen in a long time. "I think you owe me a coffee now," she joked, brushing rain from her hair. Her name was Sophie. She was a photography student, always carrying an old camera around her neck, always chasing the perfect shot. And somehow, she started chasing Caleb too. Their friendship grew quickly. She would drag him to small coffee shops and quiet parks, taking pictures of him when he wasn't looking. She told him stories about light, about colors, about seeing beauty in simple things. Caleb, who had spent years surviving, started to feel again. For the first time in a long while, he laughed without forcing it. With Sophie, life felt a little softer, a little lighter. In the moments they shared, Caleb forgot about his 3 jobs. He forgot about his aching muscles, his falling grades, and the cold city that never waited for him. But life in New York didn't stop. It didn't slow down for love. As work and school piled higher, Caleb's time with Sophie started slipping away. He missed dates. He arrived late to meet her, tired and apologizing, his eyes already closing from exhaustion. He missed her photography showcase, a night she had begged him to attend. Each time, Sophie forgave him, but Caleb could see it in her eyes. He was disappearing from her, little by little. "I just want you to be here," she whispered once, sitting across from him in a small cafe, her fingers wrapped around a cold cup of tea. "I'm trying," Caleb said softly, his heart breaking inside his chest. "I'm trying so hard." And he was. He was chasing his skyline. He was working to clear his father's name. He was fighting for his future. But Sophie needed more than someone who was always running. One evening, she placed a small envelope in his hand. Inside was a photograph. It was Caleb standing under the city lights, looking away, looking distant. On the back, she had written, "Sometimes we lose beautiful things while chasing faraway skies." She didn't say goodbye with loud words. She just stopped calling. She stopped waiting. She slowly faded into the city's crowd, becoming just another face Caleb passed on busy streets. And Caleb let her go. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. His dream was too big, and his time was too small. The loss of Sophie left an ache inside him, sharp and cold. But he didn't slow down. He worked harder. He studied harder. His heartbreak became fuel. But something inside him changed. New York was still fast. His promise to his father still burned inside him. His mother's voice still pushed him forward. But now, the road ahead felt lonelier. The cost was becoming clear. Caleb Turner was chasing the skyline, but some loves, some beautiful things couldn't stay. And deep down, he wondered what else he might lose along the way. It was the middle of a freezing winter when Caleb's phone rang. Snow fell hard outside his window, covering the streets like a thick, white blanket. The city was quiet, but Caleb's mind was busy, filled with deadlines, work, and the weight of his never-ending climb. He almost didn't answer the phone. It was late, and he was tired, but something in his heart told him to pick up. The voice on the other end was calm but heavy. It belonged to a lawyer from Tennessee. "Caleb Turner?" "Yes," Caleb answered, sitting up straight, suddenly wide awake. "There's no easy way to say this," the man said. "Your father passed away this morning. In prison." Caleb felt like the world slipped out from under him. His hands trembled. His throat tightened. "But there's something else," the man continued. "Your father's case was reopened. New evidence came to light. Witnesses came forward. Caleb, your father was innocent. He's been cleared. Officially." In that moment, Caleb felt like he couldn't breathe. The name Turner was finally clean. The truth had finally been told. But it didn't matter anymore, because it was too late. His father was gone. Caleb dropped the phone. His body shook as tears filled his eyes and poured down his face. He had worked so hard to prove the truth. He had dreamed of the day he would look his father in the eye and say, "I did it." But now, that moment would never come. Grief crushed him like a stone on his chest. Guilt wrapped around him like chains. Why wasn't I faster? Why didn't I find the truth sooner? Why did the system only fix it when it was already too late? He didn't go to work the next day. He didn't go to class. For a time, Caleb simply disappeared inside himself. The city passed him by, but he stood still, broken. But then, after days of silence, Caleb wiped his tears, picked up his father's broken watch, and whispered, "I won't let this be the end." His father had lost his freedom, but Caleb still had his. He would keep fighting, not just for his father's name, but for the life his father never got to finish. After the call, Caleb buried himself in his work. He didn't stop to rest. He didn't stop to heal. He pushed harder. His pain became his fuel. His grief became his fire. He took extra classes, worked long hours, and barely slept. He made mistakes. He missed buses. He faced rejection after rejection. But each time someone told him no, he pushed back even harder. The city didn't make it easy, but Caleb didn't expect easy anymore. After years of grinding, he graduated. It wasn't a fancy ceremony, but when he held his diploma, he felt the weight of everything he had survived. It wasn't just paper, it was proof. Soon after, he earned an internship at a respected company. It didn't pay much. He made mistakes there too. He forgot files. He spilled coffee on a manager's desk. He was almost fired more than once. But he never quit. And slowly, step by step, he climbed. He stayed late when everyone else went home. He learned faster. He asked harder questions. Years passed. His work began to speak for itself. His name, once dragged through the dirt in Mason Ridge, now opened doors in tall glass buildings. Eventually, Caleb Turner sat in his own corner office, high above the busy streets, with the New York skyline stretching out in front of him. He had made it. But as he looked out over the city, a quiet truth settled inside him. The victory didn't feel loud. It didn't feel like fireworks. It felt quiet. It felt lonely. The skyline was beautiful, but it had cost him so much. Sitting in that tall glass office, Caleb thought about everything he had left behind. He thought about his father, who had died waiting for the world to fix its mistake. He thought about Sophie, the girl who once loved him but had needed more than a man who was always chasing something. He thought about the years he had spent racing through jobs, through school, through life itself. He had climbed all the way up, but the top was not as bright as he imagined. He was proud. He had rewritten the Turner name. He had cleared the shadow that followed his family. But the success felt quiet. Not empty, but not loud either. He had won, but at a cost. And now, something inside him whispered that his story wasn't finished yet. It was time to go back to where it all began. When Caleb stepped off the bus in Mason Ridge, it was like stepping into another life. The streets were smaller than he remembered. The houses leaned the same way. The sidewalks still held the cracks he used to jump over as a boy. But now, people looked at him with something new: respect. The Turner name had changed. Caleb didn't come back to brag. He came back to build. He donated money to renovate the old community center. He created scholarships for kids who came from nothing, kids like him. He helped reopen the auto shop his father once worked in. Slowly, Mason Ridge began to heal. One evening, Caleb sat on the porch of his childhood home, his mother beside him, her hair now touched with gray. They watched the sun set together, the sky painted in soft orange and deep blue. "It's funny," Caleb said quietly. "I spent so many years trying to escape this place. But maybe I wasn't running away. Maybe I was always trying to find my way back." His mother smiled, resting her hand on his. Coming home was always part of the journey, Caleb. You just didn't know it yet. Caleb looked out toward the horizon, his heart finally full, his father's broken watch still in his pocket. He had chased the skyline. He had faced the storms. He had carried the weight of a name. But in the end, he learned something powerful. The dream was never about escaping. It was about coming home whole. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe for more powerful moments.